Kevin Richardson was only 14 when the world turned upside down. On April 20th, 1989, the clang of a police station door echoed behind him. The weight of cold handcuffs cut into his wrists. No one was with him. Not his mother, not a lawyer. Just two detectives and a promise that if he told them what they wanted to hear, he could go home. But he never made it home that night. Kevin was a soft-spoken kid from Harlem. He played the trumpet and laughed with his friends in the courtyard. That spring evening, he and four others, Yusef Salaam, Corey Wise, Raymond Santana, and Antron McCray, had gone to Central Park. Like so many young boys in New York City, they were just looking for some fun. But fate and a brutal crime in the park that night painted a bullseye on their backs. A white woman, a jogger, had been found raped and left for dead. The city was enraged. The NYPD needed suspects. Fast, the boys were dragged into interrogation rooms. They were questioned for hours. No sleep, no food, no lawyers. One by one, they were broken, promised freedom if they simply confessed. And in their confusion, their exhaustion, they said what the police wanted them to say, even if it meant turning on each other. Kevin remembers every moment of it. The screaming, the threats, the lies. He thought if he played along, they'd let him go. But instead, they threw him into a system that already believed he was guilty. The media had a field day. Headlines screamed about a wolf pack. They were called monsters, savages, their faces plastered on television screens as symbols of urban decay. But behind the hysteria, the truth was quietly sitting in the shadows. There was no DNA match, no fingerprints, no blood, no evidence placing any of the five boys at the scene. Still, the city pushed forward. The boys were convicted. Kevin entered prison as a child. He left years later a man who had missed his entire youth. He endured violence, isolation, and the pain of being forgotten. His letters home were filled with longing and fear. His mother's tears stained every visit. Then, in 2002, the truth finally clawed its way to the surface. Matias Reyes, a convicted rapist already serving a life sentence, confessed the attack. His DNA matched. His story fit. Every detail confirmed he acted alone. The boys, now men, were exonerated. Their names cleared, but their lives were changed forever. Kevin stood outside the courthouse, free, but not whole. The system had stolen years he could never get back. Yet there he stood, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The city offered settlement, a monetary figure to close the chapter. But buried in that offer was something else, a silence clause. Kevin could take the money, but he'd have to quiet the pain. He'd have to sign away the right to speak freely about what happened. The injustice, the scars. He got justice, but at a price. And as he looked out over the city that once condemned him, one question echoed in his mind. Was silence worth survival? When Kevin Richardson walked out of the courtroom in 2002, the cameras flashed like lightning. News outlets called it a triumph of justice. The Central Park Five, now the exonerated five, had finally been cleared of all charges. But justice delayed is rarely justice delivered. Freedom did not mean healing. Kevin tried to return to life, but the world he left behind had changed. So had he. The years in prison had carved invisible scars. He struggled to sleep. Crowds made him anxious. The sound of keys or a slamming door could send him spiraling back into the cell. People called him exonerated, but to many, the stain of suspicion lingered. Job applications were denied. Landlords turned them away. Some still whispered, still doubted. And Kevin, like the others, had to carry the weight of crime he didn't commit, even in freedom. Then came the offer. The city of New York proposed a $41 million settlement to be divided among the five men, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, an apology in the form of a check. But in the fine print, there was a silence clause. Accept the money, but don't speak freely about the case. Don't talk about the officers. Don't name names. Don't expose the cracks still running through the system. It was justice with a muzzle. Kevin hesitated. He wanted closure, but not if it meant burying the truth. Not if it meant pretending the pain was over. He thought about the boys still out there, facing the same broken system. He thought about the next Kevin Richardson, sitting alone in a room, being told to confess to something he didn't do, and yet survival has a cost. He signed. The money helped, therapy, housing, a fresh start. Kevin began speaking at schools, colleges, and conferences, using his voice where he could. He worked to turn his pain into power, to inspire and protect the next generation. But every so often, he'd feel the edges of that silence, the things he couldn't say, the stories left untold. Because justice didn't come with a full voice. It came with conditions. Years later, as the Netflix series When They See Us brought the case back into the spotlight, the world finally saw what Kevin had lived through. People cried. They marched. They demanded answers. But Kevin had known the truth all along. He was never a wolf, never a monster, just a boy who loved music, who trusted adults, who paid for a lie with his youth. Today, he stands not just as an ex-Neary, but as a reminder that justice isn't just about righting a wrong. It's about making sure it never happens again. This is Black Rise. Kindly like and subscribe. Years have passed since Kevin Richardson was exonerated, but his story didn't end with a court ruling or a cash settlement. His true rise, the one not written in headlines, began quietly, in classrooms, on stages, in living rooms where parents now tell their children, know your rights. Kevin found his voice in places he never imagined, not in courtrooms, but in communities. He became a speaker, an advocate, a mentor. The scars were still there, yes, but they became part of a larger message. Survival is not the end. Rising is. He stood before students in New York and beyond, telling them how the system had failed him and how they could protect themselves. His voice, once silenced, now echoed louder than the lies ever did. He partnered with justice reform organizations, marched in protests, sat on panels with lawmakers, and met with activists working to dismantle the very system that once caged him. He didn't just want justice for himself. He wanted it institutionalized for everyone. Kevin's rise wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption, about reshaping a narrative that had once painted him as a monster. He had been robbed of his youth, but not his purpose. He reconnected with the other four men, Corey, Raymond, Yusef, and Antron, not just as survivors, but as brothers. Together, they shared their story around the globe. Their bond wasn't just forged in trauma, but in the resilience that came after. When the five stood before a crowd of thousands in Washington, D.C., under a hot summer sun, Kevin looked out and saw something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Children wearing T-shirts with his name. Parents holding signs that read, "We believe you." Strangers weeping not in pity, but in solidarity. Kevin turned pain into power and power into purpose. He launched initiatives to help wrongfully convicted youth. He funded scholarships in Harlem. He even returned to music, that same trumpet he played as a boy, now a symbol of the voice he reclaimed. But the journey is never finished. Every time he hears of another wrongful conviction, another coerced confession, another young boy pulled into a system designed to break him, Kevin remembers, and he rises again, because his story is not just about the past. It's a warning, a lesson, and a call to action. Kevin Richardson was silenced, then exonerated. Now he's leading a movement. And this is the true meaning of Black Rise. The fight continues. Kevin Richardson's story didn't end with a movement. It expanded into a legacy. The pain he endured as a teenager, the fight he survived as a young man, and the platform he built as a survivor, all of it began to crystallize into something greater. Generational impact. Today, Kevin doesn't just speak. He builds. He advises criminal justice reform think tanks, helps shape school curriculum on legal rights, and sits on advisory boards for youth protection programs. He works hand in hand with legislators, helping them draft laws aimed at preventing wrongful convictions and regulating police interrogation methods, especially for minors. In Harlem, he opened the Kevin Richardson Center for Justice and Youth Empowerment, a hub for education, advocacy, and healing. Inside, young people learn not only about their rights, but about resilience, history, and leadership. The center runs creative programs, from spoken word workshops to documentary filmmaking labs. because Kevin knows that the most powerful revolution begins with storytelling. He's also made it a point to bring art into justice. A lifelong lover of music, Kevin partnered with local artists and musicians to launch the Voices Uncaged initiative, blending music, poetry, and testimony from the wrongfully convicted to raise awareness in schools and communities across the country. And yet, he never lets the world forget. In every interview, Kevin speaks the names: Corey Wise, Antron McCray, Yusef Salaam, Raymond Santana, his brothers, his comrades in the struggle. Their journeys, while uniquely painful, are inseparable from his own. Each year, on the anniversary of their exoneration, they gather not for a celebration, but for a recommitment to the fight, to the youth, to the truth. Kevin often says, "Our freedom wasn't a finish line, it was a starting point." He speaks with the calm force of someone who has endured the unimaginable and emerged with clarity, not just about what happened, but about what needs to happen next. And what's next is a world where boys like him never have to learn how to survive a system built to destroy them, where freedom isn't earned through suffering, but guaranteed by justice, where every child, no matter their color or zip code, can dream and live without fear. Kevin's rise is no longer his own. It belongs to the next generation, because Black Rise is not just a story. It's a spark, and it's spreading. This is not the end. It's only the beginning. In the years since their exoneration, Kevin Richardson and the Exonerated Five have become more than survivors. They become symbols of resistance and proof that even in the darkest corners of injustice, light can break through. But symbols alone don't change systems. That's why Kevin keeps going. Even when the applause fades, even when the headlines move on, he walks into high schools where young black boys sit quietly, wondering if the world sees them as criminals or kings. He walks into prisons and speaks with the wrongfully convicted, letting them know that someone believes them, that someone got out, that someone is fighting for them. He's taken their story global to London, Johannesburg, Sao Paulo, cities where injustice wears a different face but speaks the same cruel language. In every room, Kevin carries the same message. We were just kids, and they threw us away. Don't let them do it again. He knows the fight is bigger than him. It always was. Today, Kevin is mentoring future lawyers, helping young black men get into law school, supporting women-led justice initiatives, and training investigators on ethical interrogations. He's pushing for policies that require cameras in all interview rooms, mandatory legal representation for minors, and the end of solitary confinement for youth. And when anniversaries come, when the pain resurfaces, Kevin doesn't retreat. He remembers, reflects, then rises again, because he knows this truth. The system didn't just take their youth. It tried to erase their future, but it failed. The flame that tried to die in that interrogation room, in that prison cell, now lights the path for millions. Kevin's story reminds us that justice is not passive. It doesn't sit and wait. It moves. It fights. It rises. And so must we, because every time a voice is silenced, another must speak louder. Every time a child is wrongly accused, another must be fiercely protected. Black Rise is not just a name. It's a vow to rise, even when the world pushes you down. A vow to speak, even when silence pays better. A vow to build, even on broken ground. Kevin Richardson lit that fire. Now it's ours to carry. Long after the lights dim and the speeches end, the true impact of story is found in what inspires others to do. And Kevin Richardson's story, the story of the Exonerated Five, continues to send ripples across generations, across nations, across systems. Because it's not just about what happened to them. It's about what happens next. Young filmmakers now use their lens to tell untold stories of injustice. Teenagers, once silent in the face of discrimination, now speak boldly in classrooms and on social media. Lawyers have entered courtrooms fueled by the pain and courage of the Central Park Five. Judges now rethink confessions. Policymakers cite their case by name. Kevin often says, "The system didn't just fail us. It revealed itself to us. Now we show it to the world." And the world is watching. There are documentaries, dramatizations, books, yes, but more importantly, There are now laws introduced in their names. Protections for minors under interrogation, compensation reforms, mandatory videotaping of interviews, nationwide discussions around race, media, and police accountability, sparked in part by the story that once tried to be buried. Kevin continues to rise, but now he rises alongside others, artists, activists, teachers, survivors, each carrying their own story, each lighting a fire in their space. And in that light, something shifts. A prosecutor questions their own bias. A teacher reshapes their curriculum. A student chooses law over silence. The legacy of the Exonerated Five has become a compass. And Kevin Richardson? He's not just a voice anymore. He's a movement. He's a mirror. He's a mentor. His past became the blueprint for a different future. And to every system that tried to silence him, to every hand that forced his confession, to every voice that doubted his innocence, he doesn't just say, "I survived." He says, "I transformed, and now I transform others." That is the power of rising. That is the spirit of Black Rise. This isn't a conclusion. This is an awakening. From a fire of injustice, something remarkable has risen. Not just a story of Kevin Richardson, but a path paved for others to follow and to lead. The story has never been about dwelling in pain. It's about what you do with it. Today, Kevin stands as both witness and architect of a future that demands more justice, more truth, more accountability. And most of all, more voices refusing to be silenced. He now works to institutionalize what he once had to fight for, a system that values every life equally. He's mentoring public defenders, funding scholarships, helping reform policing policy at the state level. He speaks not to be heard, but so others learn to speak for themselves. But he knows the work is never done. Each year, more names are added to the list of the wrongfully convicted. More children are thrown into systems that treat them like threats, not dreams. Kevin sees them, and he remembers. That's why Black Rise isn't a movement tied to one story. It's a revolution of stories. Stories of people who've fallen and chosen to stand. Stories of voices once buried, now amplified. Stories of injustice, transformed into fuel for change. Kevin believes in building bridges over broken ground, and so he's begun connecting survivors of injustice across the globe, from Rikers Island to Rwanda, showing that the fight for truth knows no borders. He's collaborating with filmmakers, authors, educators, equipping them with the tools to carry these stories into every corner of society, into every policy room, every courtroom, every classroom, because the future Kevin envisions isn't one where we simply react to injustice. It's one where we prevent it. And that future, it's not as alone to create. It belongs to all of us, to every parent teaching their child about truth, to every teacher including these names in their lesson plans, to every artist creating from a place of purpose, to every listener, every believer, every fighter. Kevin Richardson walked to the fire and came out forged, not broken. Now he hands us the torch. What will you do with it? Because Black Rise isn't just a name, asterisk. It's a legacy waiting to be lived. The legacy of Kevin Richardson and the Exonerated Five does not end with applause or admiration. It lives on through action, through those who choose to pick up the torch and carry it forward. It lives in a young girl in Brooklyn who watches when they see us and decides to become a civil rights attorney, in the teacher who rewrites their curriculum to include the history of wrongful convictions, in the father who teaches his son how to speak up and never sign away his truth. The ripple has become a wave. Kevin always believed that change doesn't come from waiting. It comes from showing up again and again, even when you're tired, even when you're afraid. That belief has sparked coalitions, inspired protests, led to real, tangible reforms. And more importantly, it's cultivated a generation who no longer sees justice as a dream, but as a right. Across the country, new names are rising. Young activists and advocates, creators and counselors, judges and journalists, all guided by a light that first broke through decades ago, in a prison cell, in a courtroom, in a silent prayer for justice. Kevin sees them, he meets them, he mentors them, because he knows a movement without successors is just a moment. So now, the question turns to us. What will we teach? What will we fight for? What will we build? The work isn't done. But we are not starting from scratch. We stand on the foundation laid by Kevin and the Five, and our voices, our choices, will define the next chapter. No one gave them justice. They demanded it. No one handed them freedom. They reclaimed it. So now, let us honor their rise, not with silence, but with movement, because Black Rise doesn't fade when the credits roll. It begins again with us. The story continues. Justice, as Kevin Richardson learned, is not a final note. It's a symphony in progress, and every voice that joins adds depth, power, and rhythm to its melody. The exonerated Five have played their part, striking chords of truth and resilience that shook the conscience of a nation. But the music doesn't end there. Now, it's up to us to continue composing the score. Kevin often reflects on the silence that haunted those early days, the silence of the media that judged, the silence of a system that didn't listen, and the silence that followed their screams of innocence. That silence, once deafening, is now broken by a chorus of resistance. In cities across the world, youth-led justice summits gather. Families of the wrongfully incarcerated band together to push for DNA access, retrial opportunities, and transparency laws. Universities offer courses on the Central Park Five case, not as a moment in time, but as a lens to view systemic oppression. Kevin attends these forums, not as a guest, but as a guide. He shares. He listens. He connects the dots between the trauma of his youth and the policies of the present. His words are no longer just testimony. They're instruction. And as the world changes, so does the nature of the fight. Misinformation, deepfake confessions, racial profiling, and artificial intelligence. Kevin and those like him adapt, not with fear, but with focus. Because justice is not a destination. It is a living, breathing pursuit, and the pursuit must be guarded. Guarded by storytellers who will not let the truth be rewritten. Guarded by educators who will not allow history to be diluted. Guarded by citizens who know that silence is complicity. This movement, this Black Rise, is not an echo of the past. It is the voice of the future. A future that knows names like Kevin Richardson. A future that remembers the cages built for children. A future that refuses to go back. So what is the next note? What harmony will you add? Because the story isn't over. The music hasn't stopped. And Toj. There are some wounds time doesn't heal. Some shadows that stretch across decades. Some silences so loud, they echo through a lifetime. Kevin Richardson knows them all. Years after the exoneration, after the interviews, the documentaries, the awards, he stood again before the building where it began. The precinct. Smaller than he remembered, but colder. He walked through the halls as a man, but felt like a boy again. 14. Lost. Terrified. Alone. He stepped into the room. That room. Where innocence was shattered and a lie was born. And there, in the quiet, he pulled from his coat a photograph. A boy with wide eyes and a nervous smile. He placed it gently on the table where he was once broken, and left it there, not out of anger, but remembrance, because no apology could return the years stolen. No courtroom ruling could give back Christmases missed, graduations unseen, or a mother's warm hug at the end of a school day. He had survived, yes, but not without loss, not without scars. There were nights he still wakes up in sweat, dreams of locked doors, screams, silence. There were birthdays he spent behind bars, pretending not to care. There were letters he wrote to himself, just to keep from forgetting who he was. But he never let them win. He never let their lie become his truth. Kevin Richardson rose, not by erasing the past, but by carrying it, publicly, painfully, purposefully. He turned his sentence into service, his trauma into truth, his suffering into strength. And now, long after the headlines faded, his name remains, not as a number, not as a suspect, not as a statistic, but as a symbol, a reminder that a child once framed became a man the world could not forget. So to the boy who sat in that room, afraid, unheard, unseen, we say, we see you now, we hear you now, and we will never be silent again, because justice delayed will never be justice denied, and truth buried will always rise. He lost his boyhood, but gave birth to a movement, and though the scars remain, so does the rise. but the rise, it never will. Please like, share, and subscribe to Black Rise channel. Thank you, and God loves you.